It's Monday morning, September 21st, and I'm Matt Ferentz. Good to see you again this morning. Well, not really see you. I guess you're seeing me this morning, but it's 21st of September, another beautiful Monday morning out there. And today we're going to talk about political crickets. You can see half of that right now on the screen. But just a couple of reminders, a couple updates about what's going on. You may have seen, if you're noticing in the newspapers and other coverage, that some lawsuits have ended in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, clearing the way for ballots to finally be printed. So if you have registered for a mail-in ballot, that should be sent out relatively soon. I don't know an exact date, but I know that the counties are working to get those ballots printed and certified so they can be sent out so that people can start voting. Actually, your options are, of course, the mail-in ballot. You can apply for that still, votespa.com. You can also go to your county board of elections and you can vote in person there. You actually go ask for a mail-in ballot. You apply for the mail-in ballot right in person. They'll give it to you. You can fill it out and leave it one-stop shop so you can vote in person prior to November 3rd. And then there's also, of course, the November 3rd election that is only 6 weeks away. So we're not that far from the end of the campaign and election season. So things are steaming along. Well, let's talk a little bit about some stuff about political crickets, things like that. I have to reach up here and move that across like that. So what I'm talking about with political crickets, of course, I think we need a little bit of color here in some ways, is that idea that in the silence is when you can often hear what a politician really thinks, or what a politician is afraid to be seen for thinking. So that's what I want to talk about today is political crickets. And since we are 6 weeks away from the election, as you know, all elections are both for someone and then running against someone, I do need to talk some here about reasons why I've elected to run against Brad Roy, our incumbent. And one of the big issues that first comes to mind immediately, as you know, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away this weekend. And that's a terrible loss for the United States. The loss of any Supreme Court justice is significant and a moment of national mourning. This is also the end of a 29-year career on the Supreme Court. And it's the end of a life of someone who was loved and whose loss would be mourned by many. And that's something we need to think about. And I want to tell you exactly what my opponent, Brad Roy, has said publicly about the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And that's political crickets, is what we're talking about. There's been nothing. And in fact, the one thing that we have seen that Brad Roy has talked about relative to the Supreme Court is talking about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and railing against it publicly this week for the decisions. Sorry, my camera is slipping a little bit here. There we go. Railing against some of the decisions of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that have everything to do with voter access and helping ensure that people have an opportunity to vote. And so I think it's in both that silence and in that noise that you can hear what a politician is really all about. No commentary on the loss of a giant of the Supreme Court and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and lots of commentary on the politicization, what he sees as the politicization of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And he would be among some others who are trying to push forward an idea to create a statewide electoral college for judges because they're not happy with the decisions that judges are made. So they want to try to stack the court in their direction to have more conservative judges that would vote in the way that they want instead of with the law. So that's in the crickets. You can hear the crickets and you can hear what's happening. And so the idea is, where are the silences or where are the absences? And where are the chirps? And so the absence, we can just think about RBG. that is an absence. And then the chirps are in not liking, well, we'll just sort of chirp at the PA Supreme Court. And we've been hearing a lot of absences and a lot of chirping in these political crickets. Another one that comes to mind is the fact that, as we've talked about in several different contexts, the city of Meadville and Crawford County have extremely high poverty rates. So 24% poverty in Meadville, 13% in Crawford County. Both of those are above the state average. The city of Meadville is more than twice the state average in the rate of poverty. And then in per capita income, Crawford County is down near the bottom in the Commonwealth for per capita income. And it's been that way for a long time. And so you hear an absence, no noise. You hear only the crickets in talking to poverty. And the chirps you would hear is, there was a comment not too long ago, a couple of months ago, and I don't know, I'm just going to put throw people in quotes because I can't remember exactly the quote and I don't want to put it in quotation marks if it's not precise. But bragging, I'm going to go throw some people off of welfare today. And that was during the 2019 vote against general assistance when Roy and others voted against the general assistance bill that was a powerful anti-poverty legislation that existed in the Commonwealth. So crickets on poverty, chirps about throwing people off. Let's talk about racism, as we should. There's been a lot of crickets. When we get to racism, haven't heard a lot of conversation from Brad about racism other than to say it doesn't exist. This happened after a pretty significant event here in Meadville. Racism is not a problem in Crawford County, he said, even though if you talk to anybody who isn't white in Crawford County, you'll tell them they've experienced plenty of acts of racism. And his response, his chirps, were to say, boy, that's why we need more concealed carry, that the solution to racism is for more people to carry guns so they can duke it out. Those are the chirps. The absences are meaningful discussion about racism. Let's talk about LGBTQ rights. Haven't heard much about that. And in fact, these absences, these crickets that we have heard are even more egregious in that frequently on his own Facebook page, there will be supporters of his that will make commentary that is transphobic. And these transphobic comments are targeted at our state physician, Rachel Levine, who has kept us all quite safe and has been doing her very best for the people of the Commonwealth. But there have been several individuals who aggressively misgender her in those comments. And the crickets are in his failure to ever once say, don't do that, or that's not right. And in fact, we hear significant crickets in that we're not seeing any motion for LGBTQ rights coming out of Brad Roy's office. Healthcare is another example where we don't hear commentary from him. It is crickets, except in two situations. In 2018 and in 2013, there were votes that worked against Medicaid. In 2018, it was about making it harder for people to qualify for Medicaid. And in 2013, it was a vote against Medicaid expansions, which was connected to the Affordable Care Act. And the idea that, well, why would we want to allow more people to have access to health care in the Commonwealth? The crickets and the chirps there are pretty egregious. The U.S. Postal Service. I mean, I know that the U.S. Postal Service is not under the jurisdiction of a state legislature, but we've heard crickets about that from Brad Roy. And what we've heard more of is recently in the last week, part of why I'm talking about this is because the rhetoric has changed in the last week, of calling into question the election itself, the mail-in ballots. And so crickets on the problem of the Postal Service and the fact that in rural America, including rural Pennsylvania, like the greater part of District 6, the U.S. Postal Service is a low-cost lifeline to the goods and services, medical goods, all sorts of things that the people need. the loss or the reduction of U.S. Postal Service is of tremendous effect to rural people. And the chirps instead were just sort of undermining our faith in the election, blaming Democrats for, he called it a trial run. He thinks it'd be a trial run for trying to do some shenanigans in the fall. These are all like hardcore right-wing talking points that we have, and I think that's an important part. The environment, like true environmental protection or green development, we hear crickets, and the chirps are silly things like, well, we can all just not collect the clippings on our lawn, which is a good thing to do. Leave your lawn clippings on your lawn. It's good for your lawn. But we need serious environmental and green development to combat climate change and also to work toward a new economy here in the area. Or how about this big one? Campaign finance abuse. And I don't think we're hearing quite enough about this. There's so many other big stories, but campaign finance abuse is a huge, huge story that's going on in Harrisburg right now. And because a lot of people don't pay attention to what's happening in Harrisburg, we don't notice it as much. But there have been several very high-profile cases where there are significant questionable uses of campaign donations, multi-thousand-dollar expenses for trips to Europe and other meals and sort of things that appear that you're just spending your campaign money on living the high life instead of being a public servant. That's been a big issue that's been racking the GOP in particular over the last 6 months to a year in Crawford County. And so what we haven't heard is much discussion about something like that from Brad Roy. But I want to put the Wayback Clock on for a second here in our closing minutes and think about something that was called by my opponent a contract with Crawford County. And this was back in 2007 when he was running against the incumbent Teresa Forcier. And one of the big points that he was trying to make in that, and he did make, was that most of Teresa Forcier's campaign contributions were coming from out-of-county people or PACs. And the chirping at that time was that Brad Roy literally said, and you can find this still on the web, I will refuse to accept campaign contributions from PACs, which are political action groups, and special interest groups. I will refuse to collect campaign contributions from PACs and special interest groups. And there's been an absence of conversation about campaign finance abuse or campaign finance in general. And here I'm going to give you some things that probably aren't that much of a surprise if you catch the narrative drive of what I'm talking about this morning. In 2019, the top 10 contributions to the committee to elect Brad Roy were, you've got it, right? They're PACs. And in fact, overall, more than $34,000 in 2019 were donated to the committee to elect Brad Roy from PACs. And these PACs are primarily natural gas and energy PACs and insurance PACs. And so if you want to ask questions about the crickets and why you're not hearing something maybe about healthcare, or why you're not hearing something about environment and green development, all you really need to do is start looking down here. When someone promises, runs on the idea, is elected to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives on the idea that I will refuse all campaign contributions from PACs and special interest groups, and 2019 got all of his money. And the most money he's collected in a calendar year, it appears, in his entire career, $34,000 from PACs. And maybe, it's hard to tell, maybe one contribution from a regular person. There's one $50 random, doesn't have to be disclosed identity contribution. That might have been a person. So $34,000 coming from PACs and $50 coming from some resident at the best case scenario. That's a broken contract with Crawford County, and we're hearing crickets about that, and we're hearing lots of chirps about politicians and fiscal responsibility and all of that. And what I'm here to say this morning is that it's crickets. It's crickets who are just making the noise. You know what it's like if you get a cricket in your house and it starts chirping. It is impossible to do almost anything. They're drowning out all the thinking. And that's what we're hearing from these chirps. The fact that he spent pretty much every waking minute since the middle of March railing against the governor. And other absence, need to put this up here for sure. I think you can still see this down here. There's an absence in PPE conversation in workers. There's been a lot of chirping about get back to work, but very little, none, conversation about helping people actually do that safely. So that's the idea here, is that we have to listen for those crickets. We're hearing crickets for a lot of the things that affect us here in northwestern Pennsylvania and Crawford, Erie County. And we're hearing a lot of chirps that are misdirecting our attention. And we need to think about some of the stuff that really matters deeply. And let's ask some questions about who is funding a politician and what does that mean about the way that they're going to vote and the sort of legislation that they're going to support. It's the 21st of September. We've got 6 weeks left in this campaign. If you can, get out there and talk to some people that you know. Make sure they're registered to vote. Make sure they know how to vote. And make sure they understand that up and down the ballot this year, this election is really important. And we need to be out there speaking our values, not letting the crickets dominate the political conversation. And I mean that more than anything at the state level, where we're hearing a lot of crickets on coverage of state level races, when these are races that matter to our daily lives in a major way. Thanks for coming in. I hope you have a good day, and I hope your week gets off to a good start today. Matt Ferentz, running for the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in District 6. See ya.